Like most native cultures, the Hawaiians surrounded cultivating and eating food with prayerful rituals. But how we eat and what we eat have drastically changed. Whether you are Hawaiian or Haole or whatever your race, what you eat now is probably far different from your ancestors' foods. The native Hawaiians had a good diet. They ate well on fish and seaweeds, cultivated fruits and vegetables, and edible roots like taro. The first Europeans who visited Hawaii made note of the natives' powerful stature, endurance, and agility. But now, in their own land, native Hawaiians have the shortest lifespan and more chronic health problems than any other ethnic group in the state. And, like all of us, they eat fewer fresh plant foods than ever before. Many Hawaiian people are eager to learn about their native foods again. Meanwhile, dozens of other cultures have migrated here and prospered. With them have come their foods and a virtual explosion in the variety of vegetables, greens, fruits, herbs, and cooking methods now thriving in one small region of the United States, Hawaii. What can this new harvest teach us about eating well in the future? Even with all our agricultural technology, even though Americans have the widest variety available to them, it's still hard for many to eat what they know they should. We're all busy, and convenience may win out over health when it comes to getting meals. Besides, there's so much good stuff out there to distract us. But here in Hawaii, there are people eating lots of fresh vegetables every day, far more than the average consumer. And that's a treat they wouldn't trade for all the junk food in the islands. These are Hawaii's community food gardeners. On Oahu alone, there are hundreds of community garden plots, thanks to the city and county's community gardening program. For just $5 a year, anyone can get a plot, water, and all the fresh produce and conversation they can stand. Michael Christensen, director of the Honolulu Botanical Gardens, explains.
Apparently in 1975, the mayor, Frank Fossey, brought back the notion of establishing community gardens in Honolulu. I don't think he realized what an impact it would have because of the diversity of cultures that we have here. Not only do we have the cultures, but with that we have the diversity of the different food crops. And in a very small concentrated area we have Caucasians, Chinese, Hawaiian, Indian people, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Samoan, and Vietnamese, as well as many others. But those are the main cultures which are represented within our community garden program for the city and county. So in one space of maybe 10 plots or 100 plots, you'll have this great mixture of all these different cultures growing different types of foods.
All these different foods being grown in one area is a botanist's dream. And it's George Staples' job to keep tabs on the huge variety of plants now growing in Hawaii. Nowhere else in the country is so diverse a food plant culture found in so small an area.
I think Hawaii is unusual because we have at least 9 different ethnic groups represented here. We have people from all over the Pacific Basin and the countries around the Asian Rim. And all of those people have brought with them plants from their own culture. They brought seeds or cuttings and they introduced them to Hawaii, and they're growing them and using them in the same ways that they would in their country of origin. So Hawaii has a very broad array of different kinds of plants and cultural practices. You can find a microcosm here of all these different cultural techniques from around the Pacific Rim. So it's a fascinating place to study ethnobotany.
The community gardens are indeed a melting pot of Pacific, Asian, and European cultures and foods. The gardeners themselves are a well-organized and enthusiastic bunch who take pride in their involvement. In Wahiawa alone, where a 13-acre area serves almost 500 gardeners, 200 people meet each month to keep things humming. But why go to all this trouble when you can usually buy these foods? Gardeners say they derive many benefits from digging in the dirt. Topping the list is their health.
That's for the health, beautiful health that. You know, when I had my stroke, I had 3 strokes, and I do a lot of exercise and everything, but ever since when I had my garden, I came back real good, strong, you know. And I guess that's the best therapy I ever had, you know.
That's
the
wonderful.
best.
Yeah, I'm practically the same way too. I had a back injury, and I needed some outlet. And living in a condo doesn't give me much opportunity to get out in the sunshine. So, besides swimming and gardening, which is one of my pleasures in life, I like it very much.
Besides physical well-being, other benefits are mentioned often as well, like camaraderie, relaxation, grocery savings, or the satisfaction of being in touch with the environment.
It's wonderful. Oh, yes, yes. You make a lot of good camaraderie here with the people. We share. I have 9 different crop in my little plot. It's only 7 feet by 17 feet long, and I have 9 different varieties growing in it. And then we share so that you can multiply that by 3 practically throughout the complex here. There's over 100 units here.
We've had a garden for about 8 months or so, and we really like it. We've got a corn garden, and we're growing a lot of different crops, and it helps with our grocery bills, and it's also fun. I think we do it because we enjoy being outdoors, and we have a tiny little home in Mililani with not enough land to really grow what we want to do, you know, what we want to grow. So this garden really helps us. I've started planting a lot of taro because my husband is from Micronesia, and we're really interested in Palauan or Micronesian foods.
Well, I like to spend the time here. It's so relaxing for me. Plus, I can cut down on my food bill. Of course, I need money to buy fertilizer, but I think it's the pleasure of seeing the vegetable growing and like raising a new family, you know. I can stay here all day. I bring my picnic lunch and stay here. Like this, we have a house green every night. Then we also have the cooked vegetables.
Well, it's a hobby more or less, you know. And when I get nothing to do, well, this is the thing to spend my time on. And I like gardening. Well, as far as health, I never think nothing about health, but I know it's good for me because I like it.
But there's another angle to all of this, one that could affect our food choices for years to come. It's called biological diversity.
We've got about 36 varieties of Hawaiian taros. We also have taros from the other South Pacific Island groups. And all of these taros were grown before Captain Cook. More than half of the traditional Hawaiian varieties of taro that we have growing in this garden would be considered endangered. And it's sort of a funny thing because normally you think of an endangered plant as being a wild plant, but cultivars, which is the name that we use for cultivated varieties of plants, can be endangered as well when they fall out of use. The sugar canes are another good example. You know, the sugar companies these days only grow 1 or 2 varieties, and they're hybrids that have been developed very recently. All of the old Hawaiian sugarcane varieties have fallen from use. Probably at least 15, maybe 25 different kinds of sugarcane that they brought with them on the canoes when they came from the South Pacific. The same with the taro. The ones that we're trying to preserve most here are the ones that are becoming very rare.
Michael Christensen explains why diversity in plants we use for food is so important.
And when I think of the sweet potato, I think this is perhaps a very good example of the importance of biological diversity and why we need to be aware of it and what's important about it. According to Beatrice Krauss, who's one of the most well-known botanists on this island of Oahu, in 1940 there were 230 varieties of sweet potato. Now there are only about 24 that we really know of that are left. The same thing applies to bananas. There are well over 70 varieties of bananas, but only about 13 of those are grown. In biological diversity, what we want to do is retain as many species as possible, because these are used in the breeding of the plants, or the hybridizing, to develop varieties that have higher nutritional values, that are able to survive better in different climates, so that more people can survive from those particular plants. So if you look at the sweet potato, going from 230 to 24 varieties, we are losing a tremendous diversity of that particular species.
In so-called first world countries, I guess, we depend on very few kinds of plants for our food. But in less well-developed countries, they have many so-called land races of crops, things that are found maybe in only one particular village or in a particular area, and they don't exist anywhere else. So again, in Hawaii, in our community gardens in particular, you find many of these obscure little varieties of vegetables and herbs that were brought from another country, and they're grown here. They may not be found anywhere else in the United States. So there is a lot of interest now in locating and growing and preserving what they call old land races of vegetables and herb species. And I think that's very important for the world's food supply. And that happened not too long ago with corn in the Midwest in the late 80s. There was a new disease of corn reached the United States, and virtually all the corn farmers grew one or two hybrids which proved to be susceptible to this disease. And there were hundreds of thousands of acres wiped out by this blight. They had to go back and develop new kinds of corn that were resistant to the disease. And they were able to do that within a few years' time. But you know, that illustrates the potential for terrible losses, economic hardship, if we lose out on that genetic diversity in the old varieties of plants and herbs.
Inadvertently, Hawaii's community gardeners are doing just that, preserving varieties of plants which we can all use for food. The things these gardeners are growing and eating add back many of the nutrients that our ancestors enjoyed in abundance, the vitamins, fiber, and trace minerals that our more refined diets today often lack. And they don't add back what we all are scurrying to avoid, cholesterol and saturated fat. By eating more fresh plant foods every day, these people eat less meat, cheese, sweets, and whole milk or butter, all prime suspects in the fight against heart disease, stroke, and other chronic diseases. But whether you want to eat for health, garden for peace of mind and friendships, or help the future of our food supply, it means changing what you eat. And that's where the fun begins. Meet Joby Chang and Deanna Nakamura. Joby is a retired chaplain, and Deanna is a registered dietitian, and both are experts in vegetarian foods and cooking local style.
We can make actually 6 items within an hour that would feed, you'd say 10 more?
Well, there were 25.
Oh, 25 people. So it's possible to be able to do a dinner in an hour.
We got some Chinese watercress, and locally the people call it kangkong. And then we have some bitter melon, and we also have some Japanese taro that's called araimo. We have some wing bean, some long bean, and
Marungai.
yeah,
Out of the yard around here.
Yeah.
Joby and Deanna also use tofu, seaweed, lotus root, and gobo. That's 3 dishes chock full of fresh vegetables and low in saturated fats for 6 people.
This is also a steamed dish, so, and it doesn't take that long, and I'll put some turnips in there. And some green beans.
I think you need to start off with the recipe that you're going to use. That way at least you know what you're looking for when you go to the market. And try one recipe of, with different ingredients that are unusual for you rather than doing a whole meal, because it might be very difficult to pull it together, and especially if you're inviting guests. So practice on your friends.
wing beans in it. Okay. You want to open it for me? And you can just snap it. They snap very readily.
Also in this wok dish was chicken, sort of. Because they are Seventh-day Adventists, Joby and Deanna cannot use meat in their cooking. Instead, they use a meat substitute made from soy protein that looks, acts, and feels like cooked chicken.
So this is a soy texturized protein substitute that's basically used in place of chicken in a variety of fried chicken dishes. And what we can do is to chop it up into small pieces and use it in a salad or a sandwich mix.
Another replacement for meat is tofu. Like meat, it can turn a side dish into a main dish.
Let me get this out of the way.
Tofu, in fact, was the main ingredient in this casserole, which Joby and Deanna baked in a muffin tin instead of one large dish.
This is tofu, carrots, and gobo with a seasoning, made a vegetarian seasoning.
This can be made into patties and fried, or baked like this, which uses less fat. Either way, this dish is ready to eat hot out of the oven, or can be refrigerated and sliced for sandwiches later. In 1 hour, our camera crew was eating a delicious soup, casserole, and steamed dish. In Hawaii, Joby and Deanna say that the ingredients for these dishes are readily available in gardens, backyards, or local markets. And the vegetables have a flavor all their own, which means you don't need much shoyu or other salty seasonings. But if you're skeptical about how good these vegetable dishes can taste, then you must get to know Alice Katawaki. Alice modestly gives her title as volunteer in charge of the herb garden at the Lion Arboretum in Manoa, where we talked with her. But this title belies the wealth of hands-on knowledge she has about tropical and temperate herbs and how to use them in foods.
About 4 years ago, I went to a growers conference in Chicago, and on my way back, I stopped in Phoenix, Arizona to attend a 2-day herb workshop sponsored by the University of Arizona. I was so impressed, and I learned so much, so I came home and wrote a proposal for the Governor's Agriculture Coordinating Committee. And I received a grant to have a workshop here in Honolulu. I was prepared for 50 people, and 100 people turned up. Oh, I've been growing herbs for about 10 years now. I first attended 2 workshops put on by Ken Nagata at the Manoa Library. Ken was a staff member of the Lion Arboretum, and he started the Lion Arboretum Herb Garden in 1983, and I came occasionally to help him. My favorite use is to cut down on salt and shoyu without losing or sacrificing the flavor. And we found that our blood pressure has gone down, and my husband and I both feel a whole lot better.
Alice had dozens of tips for using herbs in foods, so many that it would be hard to list them all here. Dedicated experimentation in her own kitchen has brought so many culinary successes that she's planning a book on using herbs in everything from salads to refreshing drinks. She stresses that anyone can use or grow fresh herbs, whether they live in an apartment or have a big yard.
Herbs do quite well in the clay pots, because clay pots provide good drainage. And if they get enough sunlight on the windowsill, they can grow herbs.
Perhaps most fascinating of all was Alice's knowledge of edible flowers. That's right, flowers, which have a surprising crispness and light flavor. Their leaves and petals are rich sources of vitamins, and of course, they add unsurpassed color to foods.
I think people eat with their eyes first, and this is why I try to make my salads colorful. These are all edible flowers mixed in with iceberg, arugula, sorrel, and let's see, all the rest are edible flowers. This is a nasturtium, and here's a Johnny Jump Up, which is a wild violet, and I also use this to garnish omelets. Now this is an elderberry, which is found wild up in Tantalus, These are the pineapple sage flowers. And my favorite is the daylily, which I have torn into little chunks here. The daylily is very rich in vitamin A and vitamin C. And the children who come to tour the Lion Arboretum love to taste this.
The daylilies were good, and it was fun to bite into one, like a grazing horse getting a rare treat. To use petal flowers like these pinks, violets, or snapdragons, Alice removes the base of the petal, the bitter part, then sprinkles the petals in salads. But the main thing about trying fresh herbs is to introduce a little at a time to your food.
When I first started using fresh herbs in salads, I broke them into, or tore them into big chunks, and I learned that this is not the way to introduce herbs to people. I found that people kept shoving them aside because there was a strange greenery in the salad. Now, when I introduce something new, I cut them into slivers and blend them with the salad so people would get the flavor instead of seeing a big chunk of an unusual greenery.
And for dried herbs, Alice makes her own blends.
I save all my empty herb jars and other little jars to put in the blends that I make at home. I just finished this yesterday. This is excellent for vegetable dishes, almost all vegetables. And I use it primarily for broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages. It's a blend of 2 parts of dill, 1 part of onion powder, and 1 part of the skin of this calamondin, which is a member of the lemon family. I'm experimenting now with different herb blends so that I can cut down on salt. I'm not saying not to use any salt, but I would encourage people to cut down on their salt and show use some herbs instead.
Alice's knowledge and enthusiasm make it look so easy, but you don't have to be an expert gardener to buy or use these herbs and vegetables. A great way to find some of this unique produce is to visit the Community Gardeners Food and Plant Sale, which happens twice a year at Foster Botanical Gardens in Honolulu. The gardeners love talking about what they grow and how to prepare it.
This is Okinawan loofah, and it has more to eat than the other loofahs. When they're young, you eat the whole thing. It's not fibrous. It's just a chicken broth with some button mushrooms. That's all. Bring it up to a boil, put your chopped loofah in, put the lid on, turn the fire off.
Oh, I have Okinawan spinach.
How do you use that?
Oh, well, you can parboil, and it's not like other spinach, like Malabar spinach, the regular spinach. And you can use this when you cook fish, like soap fish. You can put this in it too, you know.
It's like a plate.
And you can stir fry this one.
Just go ahead.
This long squash, one of our gardeners who's 85 years old, grew one about this big, and we had it on display at the plant sale several years ago. And they cut it up after the plant sale was over, and they sold it in pieces or gave it away towards the end. But this we skin and then cook it like a squash.
You boil it or bake it?
Boil it. Usually boil it with some pork. It's very tasty. Or chicken. Just cut it up, and then we put soy sauce on.
It's called yama-imo. The Japanese use it like they use a potato. They'll cook it in their Japanese stews like nishime. It'll be eaten raw. It actually is grated over hot rice, and it's eaten with hot rice.
It's like it's in the same family like watercress, but this is onchoy. You can eat it raw, like soak it in vinegar and salt and water. You can use this for cooking, and that's it. And stir fry.
This we call Portuguese squash or chayote. This one here, there's a little seed in there that you can cut it open and eat it just like that, or you can even use it to cook. But I like the seed from this one here because it has a nutty flavor. The tips of this plant here, I also use that. I notice they have it. The tips of this chayote, I pick the tips, just the very tip, and use it as stir-fried vegetable in case there's not any green vegetable. And it's a chewy thing, and I usually cook it with stir-fried with shrimps and dried shrimp and garlic.
Of course, you don't have to wait for this special event to start eating more fresh vegetables and herbs. They're available all year round in most markets or in the bustling food shops of Chinatown, where a feast for the table begins with a feast for the eyes. There are many people here in Hawaii who have a special knowledge of the foods that can help us all to eat well. By preserving this knowledge and passing it on, there will be a fantastic variety of foods to choose from for generations to come, and we'll know how to use them.
Well, I think many people today don't realize how plants and animals are grown and used. They think milk comes in cartons and apples come in plastic bags in the supermarket. So modern people have lost touch with the sources of our food plants. I think it's important to document in Hawaii how the different ethnic groups that live here grow and use herbs and vegetables and other plants as part of their diet. It's part of their cultural tradition. So what we're trying to do, I think, is to record that, because a couple more generations and some of the young people that are, kids today are not going to know how these plants were used even by their grandparents.
Thanks to Hawaii's melting pot of gardeners, the legacy of gratitude, good health, and community spirit, so evident in the rituals of the early Hawaiians, can live on today and can be enjoyed by anyone of any culture in the foods of the new Hawai'i Harvest.